Hello, everyone. We're back, and it's that time again. 1 week away from EB02 dropping, and it's tier list time. Um, I am recording this really late, um, so apologies if I do sound a little tired. But I wanted to get this video out for the members at least like 3-4 days before I actually get a chance to post it. But yeah, I'm gonna go through some of the decks that got a major buff. Decks that I think will be meta, and just the newer leaders in general. I'll start with what I perceive to be the two best decks going into the next format. A lot of people are saying that this is unequivocally the best deck, and there's no arguments about it. I think this deck has some major weaknesses, and our meta is actually a lot different from the one they had in the East. So I actually don't think this is the best deck. I actually think this is the second best deck. Um, and I'll kind of explain why. I have Shanks still being the best deck, and will definitely still be the most represented deck going into any major tournament. Um, Although this deck does brick a lot, um, the thing is, I think Shanks, if it's built for it, has like a maybe 50-50, 60-40 matchup into green purple. How Shanks will lose to green purple is that if Shanks cannot remove that Sanji putting on curve. But because you remove by power rather than removing by cost, you don't actually care about their stage. You also have access to incredible cards like Divine Departure and the Molgon from ST21. And I think going into this format, you probably play 4 Molgon, 2 Divine Departures as your removal events. Due to the fact that it's going to be like a very Bonnie heavy meta and Smoker heavy meta. So you need an answer to 8 cost kid. A lot of the decks that are trying to target green purple at the moment all lose to Shanks pretty badly. And this deck does have major weaknesses, like obviously red removal being one of them. You're weak to 8 cost kid, which you're play the Gamma Knife for. Not really searchable outside the 1 cost event. You also kind of lose to aggro decks. Not like completely lose. It's not like 100% winning. Why this deck did so well in the East is mainly because this deck stomps Teach. Teach has like no other options. At least from what I've tested, you can't really remove board. You're kind of just praying that like you play a bunch of Burgesses and you have enough counter in hand, and you can try and race them. Um, if you can try to play the removal, like there was a build in the East with like Herodins and Jacks, and like it was like, oh, you want to go first, and then what? You play stage on 1, on 2 you play Stronger plus Dot Q, and then next turn you Kuzan into Van Augur, and then pray that they don't have 2 stage for the Sanji pudding the following turn, which is like they say is 40-60 for Teach, but it's worse than that if you want to try to play removal. And they're not playing Shigans or anything. It is quite weird. I don't really understand it. Because the theory kind of you want to stick a bunch of as many strongers on the board as possible, and then like the theory kind of falls flat when they just play the Zoro, the 4-cost Zoro that rests. Because this deck doesn't play that many on plays, it feels really bad to just turn off for a 2 off card. But when they have it, you lose the game on the spot. Um, yeah, but back to what we're talking about. Obviously this deck um had like a was kind of kept in check by Doflamingo. It was maybe like 55-45 to Doflamingo. If you draw Electric Luna, you win. Pre-ban list. No Electric Luna means you almost always lose. But yeah, the problem is Duffy does not have Jinbei anymore. And I think this is 50-50 matchup, maybe slightly GP favored. Because you don't really have an efficient way to remove Jinbei. That's not Jinbei. Sanji and Pudding off the field, other outside of Jozu, and Jozu can't even remove it with the stage, and Grab cannot remove it if they have the stage, right? And when they draw their Electric Luna, which I think it'll be like maybe anywhere between 2 to 4 because it's really good in the mirror, you almost always just lose the game on the spot. Yeah. I'll start talking about rest of the leaders now. So I'll start with OP1. I think Zoro actually has a decent position into GP. You have a lot of small bodies, annoying bodies that they have to swing into, as well as you have the ability to actually remove that um, Sanjin putting on curve with Mogun, which Zoro will play 4 copies of. Probably 4 buggy as well. Um, 4 buggy, and then you don't play Koreha, you probably play 4 buggy for Nami, and like the animal package still. But I think that is just good enough to beat GP. GP, like when you swing a lot of small numbers into it, it gets really annoying. You eat away at their hand really, really quickly. But that deck does draw a lot, right? Your Steve generates you a card, Sanjin Pudding generates you a card, Zoro generates you a card, Robin generates you a card. But a lot of this deck is very bricky. You know, I think Zoro maybe has like a 55, 45 into it. One thing to note is that Green Purple Luffy is actually like a really hard deck to play. Um, I'm actually really excited for this leader because everything we have right now is reasonably linear outside of like Teach and Dolphy. So this deck is actually going to bring new light into the game, and I think a lot of the good players will be playing this. So we'll see how this deck actually does, but I expect this to win a lot, obviously. But it has some weaknesses. I'll talk more about it as more matchups come on. A lot of this video will be how your deck does into Shanks and GP. Law. This is the lowest I've had Law in one of the tier list videos. I really believed in this deck before, but there was just not enough good pilots that were playing the deck, so it never got like a top. I think this meta is actually really bad because of GP. 6k leader in the Law for a deck that wants to swing a bunch of 5s is horrendous. Also, Law kind of struggles against the new 4-cost Zoro, the green one. On play, rest the character costs of 4 or less, I think. And not on play, if your opponent has 2 or more characters, this character can attack active. I'll maybe have it on screen if I can be bothered editing this video. Probably not. But it's the green one from EB02. That's maybe like a 2 or 3 of in that deck. And like Law's always gonna be struggling against rest down a chopper blocker, rest down a searcher, so you can't and this kill the searcher, so you can't recycle it for later. But this deck can definitely still top. The deck has problems into Duffy, lose to Shanks, lose to GP. So I think this is the worst position this deck has been in since maybe OP5 when Sakazuki was first popularized. Also, Luchi's back, and Law does not want to see Luchi. Whitebeard. Um, I not the biggest fan of this leader, to be honest. I don't expect this to actually top anything. Where's OP? Let's hear this. The problem with Whitebeard, obviously, outside of Pudding, the problem with Whitebeard is that the way it's built now is very hard to actually rush down anyone except for Teach. And you're always on a clock, and a lot of decks just want to go so wide that it's so annoying for Whitebeard at the moment. Your deck either has really high defenses and play bigger and dumber guys, and have a lot of counter, or your deck is like just goes super wide, which Whitebeard does not want. At local definitely can still win a locals, but this deck I think you'll struggle to even win a locals with this deck, to be completely honest. It doesn't really get any new cards to my knowledge. And the structure deck was good. ST21 helped a little bit with the addition of Dream Luffy Mogon, but it's just the deck's not good enough. It's crazy to say, but that deck I think currently is way too slow. Arlong. I'll actually talk about Arlong alongside Hody. These leaders got their support. A lot more coming in OP11, which I think they use a lot more. But that 3-cost Arlong is actually really insane. It just says, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it just says like a character cannot be arrested, which means you can't block or attack with it. Sometimes it could even be better than like freezing a character, right? A lot of variety. Arlong, I think they will get their time of day in OP11 a lot more than they do now because of the meta. Obviously, Hody can rest the Dawn against GP, which is not nothing. Arlong can rest the Dawn, cannot rest the Dawn, and you can't really rush down GP. So Arlong for now, not it. But in OP11, you could do okay into Snake Man. It's doable, you know. This is also kind of doable, but I think Hody is a better leader at the moment than Arlong. There's being 4 life, we are very weak in the Shanks. At least this can kind of try and do something, but it has potential. I don't know all the Fishman cards off the top of my head. You know, obviously Vanderdecken's being one of the craziest cards in this game, but also 7 cost Hoodie Jones, I guess, is really good into this deck. And green in general kind of does okay. So I think this deck maybe has some potential. If someone wants to cook. Nami. Nami. I'm actually this is one of the decks I'm not completely sure about how it does against GP. I've not touched Nami since like OP5. Not really played it. But just picking it up, I've seen a lot of people. I've seen Cavendishes, and this obviously this one in regional, so you know the deck's not nothing. Um, it could definitely do something, you know. Especially into the same meta of like still have Shanks, still have Blackbeard. Um, yeah, a lot of people are playing Cavendish, which is like I actually don't know how good that card is. It feels really good against bad decks. Is how I would kind of say it. You know, I think like every deck can just remove it so easily. You know, blue can remove it, red can remove it, green can just freeze it and just not care about it. Um, this this deck didn't really get anything new to my knowledge. Nojiko kind of gets worse as well, as you can't bounce back anything in this deck because of the stage. So it's like, why are we really playing Nami this format? Yeah, I struggle to find a reason to play this deck to see why people are playing this deck, but I could see it doing quite well in the hands of like a one trick, you know. Someone who's very practiced on the deck can definitely do bits. It's always a scary deck, and yeah. Hopefully this deck doesn't become meta. I don't like this deck. I don't like playing against it. But yeah, it could definitely win. Definitely. Katakuri. I think Katakuri is in one of his worst spots at the moment as well. Um, this deck, obviously, Blackbeard matchup. We don't have to talk about it. You have a winning matchup into Shanks, and like okay into GP. I think if we're like a locals level, it'll be like here. But like for like bigger events, the problem with this deck is that like a good GP player, a good Zoro player, and a good Dolphy player will always play around your triggers. You know, things like swing. A lot of players will play in the beige, play into like random triggers. Um, getting your leader beiged like mid game, so you can't leader effect that's Dolphy, or like getting your things popped with while playing GP and using stage late. Um, but Tenmom is crazy to say. It's really slow. Um, and yeah, a lot of decks just don't really get your winning your best matchup in the meta at the moment. I think is probably going to be Shanks, and even then is like maybe closer to the 55-45, slightly kata favored if you go first. And it's like if you go first and you see like your mom's you go 7-7-10, you probably win that game no matter what. But obviously some consistency issues. When it comes to mono yellow, um, there's like 3 or 4 better mono yellow leaders than Katakuri. I'll be honest. And we're on to OP4 leaders. Yeah, the 2 OP4 leaders. If you've been watching my channel, these are the 2 leaders that I have played a lot of. Rebecca, a lot. I was misplaying so much with this deck. Um, but this deck really struggles in the GP. Struggles into just early aggro in general struggles in the Blackbeard, as a lot of your good pieces are unsearchable. If Blackbeard knows what you're doing, you almost always never win. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to build this deck, but yeah, I love this leader, but unfortunately, it got worse. And Queen, uh, it feels bad. I think Queen. I really want to put Queen here, but unfortunately, this deck just didn't really get anything this set. Um, I'm trying to think what card like in this set it could use. In OP11, I would put Queen like here, maybe. Yeah, probably like here. OP11. In that tier list video, I will actually talk a lot about Queen and how it's being built. You get like the new Nami, the Snake Man. You get the one cost yellow event that you can play. But right now, this deck, you really struggle in the GP. That the new secret rare really messes up your game plan of like, okay, I'm gonna have control the board so you get like 2 swings a turn, and that I can just eat both swings and then heal next turn. But because that card has rush, which Queen doesn't like, and it has a restand, which Queen also doesn't like, um, also really hard to remove to starve this deck because it can take its own life and it just has so much resources. And yeah, I think Queen in general is a little slow. All the rest of the matchup is still kind of the same, right? Blackbeard is still a 50-50. Shanks is still a 50-50. Zoro is like, I think we're favored into Zoro. I think we're very much favored into Dolphy. I think I have a Queen video coming up maybe tomorrow. Or like, it's either going to be tomorrow or in 4 days when this video releases about just matchups for this deck in general. Or I'm going to be too lazy and forget to film it. Yeah, we'll get there. Uh, but yeah, this leader feels okay in this set, but not something I'm going to be personally playing. In this set anyway, when OP11 comes, I will give it a very good go once I get like 3 copies of that secret rare. So maybe not like release week of OP11, but like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks when people realize that card sucks and it's only playable in Queen. Yeah, OP4 leaders, Rosinante. This leader did get something new. I have seen this build like walk around like Fishman, Rosinante, and you can pull it out from the 2 cost Rosinante. And the idea is like I think it comes out rested, so you can like either play like Vanderdeckens that you don't care about, or you can pull out like the 2 cost Sugar and rest something. And then because the way Sugar is worded, even when Sugar is rested, its effect is still live, and then you can just protect it with your leader. But this is like a very gimmicky deck, and I don't think this deck's actually gonna go anywhere. This was one of my when I first got into the game. I think this is one of the first leaders I built. I think it was like when I first got in, it was like Nami, Kata, Rosinante were like the decks I put together. I would love for this deck to be good. Like that Fishman build feels like a bait, and I would love for someone to prove me wrong. But for me, this leader just isn't really playable at a high level at the moment. Bello Betty, probably here. Um, it's still an absolute monster of a deck and can absolutely high roll you in any moment. One of Queen's worst matchups. Uh, just until OP11, right? Obviously, you have like a completely winning matchup against Snake Man. Against GP is like okay. The 4 cost Zoro, if they see it, it's pretty game determining. Same with Electrical Luna. But in the GP, it's still a 4 life leader, so it could do okay. 4 life leader that cannot heal, or really remove Karasu active, unless it's specifically that 4 cost Zoro. Also, GP kind of wants to probably kind of against 4 life leaders. GP usually wants to go first, but against Betty, you get forced to go second. So you're probably like 4 on turn play Zoro from the structure deck, and then like 6 on turn probably is playing Sanji Pudding into either Zoro or the 4 cost Zoro. the green one, which I think this deck is a lot weaker going second than it is going first. However, it is more consistent. But yeah, you can't swing in the Betty. It just feels really weird for all these like ramping purple decks to play a lot of bricks. Yeah, but this deck needs the high roll. You need the consistency. Yeah, you could every matchup you could lose just because you didn't draw well, which is the biggest problem with this deck. Until OP11, this deck will stay here. OP11 probably like here. Yeah. Pluffy. I actually don't think there's no real reason to play this deck anymore. I think like every deck in the meta is just so losing for you. What GP's losing, Shanks is losing, Zoro's losing, Duffy's losing, Betty's losing. Blackbeard is not losing. Blackbeard is your only good matchup, I guess, and Nami. Um, just I think all the Pluffy players will probably go play green purple for like the start of the format until they realize, oh, this deck is a lot harder than Pluffy, and then maybe they'll jump back onto this deck. This deck will get stuff in OP11, and yeah, that's when it's gonna shine again. But as of right now, there's no real reason to play this deck. Enel, I am so excited. Ooh, where'd my leader go? I'm so excited for this leader. It's coming back. I think this deck does okay in the GP. Obviously, see all these aggro decks absolutely getting stomped. I'm actually gonna put this here. I think Enel has like that new 10 drop, obviously insane. I think that 5 cost Sanji, probably a bait. The event is also probably a bait. I kind of want to test the Sky Island package with this leader where you play Sure Holly, like back to like OP5, you know? Because like you cannot starve with this leader anymore. And it's like you can definitely contend with Shanks a lot better with your new 10 drop. The ratios like in my head is good is probably like for high end. It's probably like 2 6 moms, three or four of that 7 cost NL. Actually, probably no 6 moms. So four 7 cost NL, 4 Katakuri, 2 Yamato. Yeah, probably only 2 Yamato. 4 Russian L, the 10 cost, obviously best card in the deck, and maybe 2 to 3 aces. That's really greedy with high ends, but 7 costs don't tend to get stuck in your hand, especially with the events. I probably play like I'm thinking 4 I Am Kami, 4 a 3 Punk Rotten, and maybe 2 Shirahoshi just for the draw 3 trash 2 like draw 2 trash 1 triggers. You wouldn't play like Hawkins or Robin or any of that like kid. Maybe kids, probably not kid, but like Burning Life is like you might as well play kid if you're gonna do that, and it just doesn't feel great. Playing a good in the Luchi, but like who cares? GP will just look at your 5k attacker Hawkins and laugh at it. Shanks will just look at it and also laugh at it. It's like, what's the point? -1k to your reward. Reiju. Oops. I saw this leader pop up a lot in the London regional as a answer to Shanks. I don't think this leader does very well in the GP, but I still think like also like Blackbeard is crippling. This deck sees Blackbeard, you lose. But in the GP, I don't think this deck is doing very well until OP11, where you get some of the new stuff. You can play more of a control style. But right now, as like an aggro deck, you just get outshined by a lot of other aggro decks. Gecko Moria. I think this had a top 4 or something, right? That list looked really whack to me. Um, you know, it looks very different from the way this deck used to play back in like OP6. And just played against it the other day. Actually, this deck is nowhere near its former glory, but obviously, I think it has potential. You can maybe play some of the more. You're playing some of the Navy cards already. Maybe the 7 cost Sengoku will do something. But oh yeah, which brings me to this smoker actually. Um, yeah, I want to talk about this smoker. I think this smoker is probably the Navy leader with the most potential currently. Um, it's probably like this. Because of that new Sengoku. Um, it's a new Moria, right? With Moria gone, there's actually a reason to play that card now. And I think Smoker is probably the leader that can, yeah, make the best use out of it, out of everyone at the moment. I just don't feel like that card is going to be good enough to make Smoker C play, which is the only problem. Also, like, oh yeah, back to Moria. This deck feels really fake as an aggro deck. You know, it feels like it feels very Arlong esque, where you're playing from your hand rather than Duffy playing from the top of deck. And even though your forecasts are removing something, and that Perona is really obnoxious, I just don't think this deck has too many bricks. And yeah, decks like these will always just rush you down and basically almost always can't win. Oh, then, um, this deck has gotten some new pieces. That Yamato, obviously, great card, right? If you can play 10 rounds with this deck, and it's like you play against only Blackbeard and Blackbeard only, you're gonna win the entire tournament, right? However, against GP, I think this deck's kind of fake, you know. Um, Maybe someone will come up with a crazy list and prove me wrong, but I think the support to this deck just isn't there. And like, oh, there's gonna be people that know a lot more about this deck than I do. Um, I played against this deck in one of the store championships, and obviously it's before EB02, so I've yet to see what this deck does that like other decks don't do better. Um, Other than that Yamato, which is kind of nice, you can play like the Izo as well. Um, Having the counter is nice. 4 life, 6k leader. You know, when you compare these two, you know, 4 life, 6k leader. This is just head and shoulders better. All right, this Bonnie first. I'm gonna have Bonnie here, and you can't really talk about Bonnie without talking about Smoker. These two decks kind of go hand in hand at the moment as like one of the great answers into GP. I think Bonnie's time will come in OP11 where she is better than Smoker, but right now I think Smoker is a lot better. Mainly because Bonnie just struggles so much into Shanks, you know, and into Blackbeard. This deck has a reasonable Shanks matchup, maybe 50-50 ish, if you win the dice roll. And into Blackbeard is winning. Into GP is like slightly winning, I think. And this deck can just it can steamroll you, right? It can high roll like what 5 down, play Smoker on tap, leader on tap 2, Smoker on tap 1, play Smoker to Shigi that turn. Kind of feels like a version of GP's effect, right? Restand 2 down. But your leader feels a lot more consistent than his. But the one problem is you might not be able to remove that Sanji and Pudding as well. Obviously, Mogun, insane. But you lose a lot of tempo to turn your Mogun unless you have something on board already that can restand you the Dawn, right? If you go first, I think you beat GP 100% of the time. If you go second, you kind of struggle a little bit, I think. Boa. Ooh, what the heck? Oops. Am I back? Okay, I'm back. The thing, I'm not cutting that out. Too much effort. Okay, Boa. The thing with Boa at the moment is like you had like your bad Shanks matchup, obviously. I think you do okay into like Bonnie. Into GP, you actually do struggle unless you see multiple of that Red Rock. Why? +2 cost. Every control deck that like removes by cost kind of like just other than black, right? Because they have multiple ways to reduce the cost. Kind of just to look at GP and is like, damn, I can't really remove anything on curve like my deck's supposed to do. But if they don't see the stage, you'll stomp them. But the problem is the stage. I still have like a decent teach matchup, a decent matchup into Zoro and Smoker as well. But I struggle against like decks like Enel as well. Struggle. Oh, okay in the Nami. I think you struggle a little bit against Betty unless you see like maybe 2 copies of that 4 cost law. But this deck's gonna be a problem for Boa. If Boa can like extend the game long enough and play like if you can play 2 Kaidos back to back, you probably win. But other than that, Boa will struggle against GP and Shanks unless you hit like a magical pudding. Luchi. I'm actually sad to see that this deck is back. After the ban list, NL took a L, BY took an L. But Luchi came back. Luchi's actually a pretty good answer to green purple. The Kuzan list in the East that people are playing looks really interesting. But for our meta, that list is weakened to Shanks. But obviously OP11 doesn't have Shanks, but EB02 will. If you play Kuzan and it gets pop Shanks next turn, you lose the game on the spot. Which is like, not sure how many copies of Kuzan we're going to be playing in this deck. In in EB02 format. I'm not going to be playing this deck, I don't think. Just not really kind of the thing I want to be playing. To full transparency, what I will be playing, probably the first 2 weeks, I'll be on the Enel. Just pick up 4 copies of the SR and have some fun with this guy again. And come maybe like a 1 week after release, 2 weeks after the release, when the price settles on that secret rare, I'm going to be playing a bit of GP, probably. And then for GP for the rest of the set until OP11 comes out. And then OP11, a lot more interesting decks in OP11. Vegapunk. This deck gets the new blocker, which is really exciting. It's like a 4-cost Rebecca for the deck. Unfortunately, you can't play it from life, which is the only problem with that blocker. But this deck feels really fun to play. You can no longer play control, which is a bit of a shame. But playing aggro, you actually have like a really good matchup into the meta, surprisingly. It's not done enough testing of this deck just yet, but I'm really excited for this deck as well. I'll maybe, if I have time, I'll maybe try to play this at like 1 or 2 locals. But yeah, this deck, I've loved this deck for a long time, and you probably see me play it back in the day. I tested the aggro version, but it's the control version I really fell in love with this deck. But with no Raigo, this deck can't really play control. But yeah, we'll see. That new 5-cost Vegapunk, you play it and then you can hopefully hit an Atlas off the top of the deck, and just if you can sit on multiple Atlases, this deck is so strong. If I could ask for one thing for the deck, I'd probably say, you need to give this deck something that's like cannot be KO by effect or cannot be like removed or something. Pythagoras by itself just isn't strong enough against decks like Luchi. Because when this deck leaders that kind of attack into Luchi, unless they like break terribly, it's you're in for a bad time. Chopper. Chopper probably here. I'm not very big on this deck. With the new support, obviously people are going to be on it. Why play Chopper when you can play like LOL, Betty, Vegapunk, Zoro, Duffy, GP? Like you're playing for fun basically, right? Actually, I'm gonna move this down. Trash. Yeah. No real reason to play the deck is the only thing. You know, sure it can be strong. It has one flagship top in OP11 in the East. Um, Probably because they just wanted to play the leader for fun. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't play like just play Zoro or like Betty or something to beat Snake Man. You know, for fun leader. Marco, probably. I actually can't remember where I rated this last time, but I lost to this thing. Animal Kingdom Marco. Yeah, I'm gonna rank Marco here. That's kind of high. Probably here. Let's put Marco here. And I was that this is I am ranking this as Animal Kingdom Marco. The build where it's like Ivankov play Richie. When I first lost to this, I was like, "What the hell is going on?" And I just got high rolled. And then I saw like this one a turn, like top 32 in the American regional. I was like, "Dang, this deck maybe has legs." And then I tested it for myself. It's like I can kind of see how this deck wants to function. You know, um, you can do okay into these decks. You really need the 9+8 or 9+9 combo to beat Shanks and like bonding in general. But you don't have like because you're red, you don't have the problem of like, oh, you can't get past Ecos Kid. Um, Against GP, you could also do okay. Rayleigh is just a stupid card. You also have access to Red Rock, and you can protect your life early by like playing a lot of the animals and try to put a lot of pressure on. So yeah, this deck could do okay. I'll talk about this in a bit. Putting OP11 here right now. This deck's trash. This deck is trash. Just play Katakuri. It's probably heads and shoulders better. 4 life leader into these decks just ain't it. Especially with green, you're weak. Like this deck's really weak in the green now. Um, if you cannot remove that 5 cost smoker because of that Tashigi with the 9 mob, and yeah, it just feels weak. Kalgara, I'm actually still gonna have Kalgara reasonably high on my tier list. This deck didn't do anything this format, and I think I had it here. I'm still gonna put it quite high. I still quite believe in this deck. I think it does okay into this, okay into this. Obviously, struggles against these green decks purely because of Ecos Kid, right? Where like decks like Zoro can minus it, and decks like Duffy can just put in their hand. There's nothing stopping them from like getting a big hand and just sitting on a kid because we're yellow, and yellow just struggles against Ecos Kid. Because you don't want to play Katakuri to try to remove it. Also, this gets the tank off Russian L, which I think isn't nothing. You know, that Russian L is still it's this is the only other leader in the game that you can use it in, right? You need maybe you won't always have the effect, but this deck played ace. Like at one point when it first came out, you played like 2 aces, just as like an extra big rush body. But now you have your own that's also searchable, which it just has rush no matter what. You can only heal if you're like one or less, I believe. But yeah, Kogara still great in the Shanks. I think it's 50-50 into this as well. And Duffy might struggle a little bit. Enel, I actually think Kogara beats Enel. Zoro, you'll eat for breakfast. Luchi, you'll struggle a little bit into Luchi probably. Carrot. This leader wasn't on the tier list last time. Why do I think this leader suddenly became good? Not because of the new support cards. That card is okay. I don't know how much you actually value that stage. 1 Dawn a turn obviously is great. Being able to restand your 5 cost carrot is good, but it only restands at the end of the turn, which is the only problem. You need to kind of play this deck a little bit more mid-rangey, but this deck does absolute shit on GP. When a GP player wouldn't know what they're getting themselves into when they see carrot. Being able to search Electrical Luna in this meta is just kind of nuts. If you look at the spread, Electric Luna is just so good against almost everything on this list. Your leader effect being proactive, being the rest on 5-cost smokers, 4-cost lucky roos, Sanji pudding. Well, with this stage you can't, but you have cards like Garchu. You can play Garchu Shanks, 9-cost Shanks to deal with like a big body. You also have access to 8-cost Kid, as like every green deck is abusing. Actually, I'm gonna put this here. You have like 8-cost Kid to deal with aggro. You have like 10-cost Luffy. I think probably wouldn't play 4 copies of that at the moment. You also get the new event, the 2-cost event that can um, search for anything. The problem with this deck was that there's no high end, and having a searcher for stage means that because you can restand all your minks at the end of the turn, they won't just get swung into and die. Because the big problem was you ran out of mink bodies late game, so your leader effect was not live anymore. So the stage might actually help a lot in that case, and the you can play a milky early and just restand it as well. Also, having another 2K that's a low cost just for leader effect isn't nothing either. So 10 Dawn kinda you can play assuming you have no Wanda in hand, right? You can play the 1-cost searcher, find something, doesn't matter. You don't care. Leader effect, tap down a blocker, and then Garchu tap down the 2K and another big blocker, like the 10-cost teach blocker, and then go for game. Yeah. This deck, so much potential. If enough people actually wanted to, in this specific format of this 1 month that we have, if a good enough player takes this to regional, I actually think this can top. Maybe even win if you hit all the GPs along the way. Lim. This. Oops. I know this won a regional. I'm not hot on this deck still. Just because of the horrendous Shanks matchup, right? In EB, you struggle in the Smoker, you struggle in the Bonnie, you struggle in the Luffy, you struggle in the Shanks. This deck cannot own 8-cost Kid to save its life. And yeah, Bonnie, Luchi, these are all the top 5 here currently. All horrendous matchups for Lin. It's just, I think to be honest, if you ask me, I think London was a fluke. Lim is probably not going to win another tournament ever. I don't see this leader winning another tournament, if I'm absolutely honest. A lot of it was thriving off people not knowing what the deck actually did. Same with Queen back when I played it a lot. Having the difference in knowledge matters a lot when it comes to higher level of play, because they wouldn't really know what to play around. Obviously, going into the tournament, oh, this might have this, but the 1-cost Orochi, for example, right? No one knew what that card was played in the limb until this tournament. Buggy, I had this leader criminally high on my tier list last time. Yeah. It was 2 days after balance. Was oh, this deck beats Teach, this deck beats Luffy, and this deck beats Shanks. It did not beat Shanks. It was absolutely getting stomped by Shanks. But I still think this deck has potential on the top. It is quite a scary deck for decks with no removal. Obviously GP, because your Sanji pudding is a 5-cost, and you can just stage to put the cost of Zoro up. Your 7-cost buggy doesn't really do anything. Not sure when the structure deck comes out for us. I think it's actually at the very, very end of the EV format, so maybe it'll boost it up, right? But this deck feels like it's missing some kind of resource to make the deck completely broken. Teach. I'm gonna put Teach here. Yeah, probably here. Teach. This deck is a bad matchup for Teach, and this deck is a very bad matchup for Teach. I think your Shanks matchup, like it was a winning matchup before, but I think your Shanks matchup actually got better. Purely because of the fact that like Shanks now has the tech for green purple. Um, so I'll play like more Mulguns, more Divine Departures, and more controlled style. Maybe you have to take like a lot of the rush cards out of your deck. Which, yeah, how Shanks beat Blackbeard was like play a 3-cost Angie into 5-cost Luffy into like another 5-cost Luffy into Dragon into Shanks. You know, just rush it down. But yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll have the list on the screen if I can remember. But like, um, there's that in mainland China. I think there was a 3-on-3 last week where I was playing like 4 7-cost Jacks and 4 6-cost Harridan, the Dressrosa one, to try to beat GP, and they went 7-0. So I'm assuming that that build does have legs, but like from my testing, I would just play like aggro Blackbeard. You just play Burgess Turbo with a bunch of TKs, and that kind of just solves your smoker problem a little bit and solves your like beats Shanks and beats this. Well, beats that. Um, you need to go. You need to go second into this, or you kind of lose because you need a Dawn under your leader every turn. So you can play your curve while having a Dawn under your leader. You would just cut down on the number of Dokus Van Augers that you're playing and just play like I'm thinking 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 2Ks. I think which is insane. You got to test it for yourself. But yeah, I'm not big on this deck. I think this deck is just loses to this, and it's just rough. You know, like the deck is so hard to play, um, just like this, and there's like this deck just feels so much more rewarding. Caesar is in here because it's a new leader. I'm not going to talk about it. This leader sucks. Sugar, this leader also sucks. Not going to talk about it. Lol, this leader kind of sucks, but it has potential. You know, a lot waiting for a lot of cards from OP11, OP12 for this leader to be completely broken. But this leader will get there. Right now, you just don't really have a good matchup and struggle very much in the Shanks. Usopp goes here. Um, this deck has a big problem removing 5-cost bodies as it is, which is why like it had a bad matchup in the limb at the moment. The Sakazuki build could actually do okay into the GP Luffy, but honestly, I don't see a reason why you would play Usopp. Just play Luchi, 10 times better. Kid. Kid. Probably here. I think Kid's matchup spread is actually not that bad. Smoker can be rough sometimes, if you don't have the category for the cost Kid. Shanks is still as winning as ever. GP is actually okay. If you steal first away from GP, on your let's see, 1, 2, on your 3 down turn, you just don't swing. You just probably play a blocker and pass. On your 5 down turn, the idea is you swing 6, they'll probably take, and then you play a Hawkins. You don't have to swing that turn. There's an argument not to swing into GP they hit before they play their first turn. They can play Sanji Pudding, right, just to have less chance. But honestly, I think it's fine. You can play Hawkins, do that. Do not make Hawkins a blocker that turn. And then next turn you probably Robin and then make Hawkins a blocker. You just counter out early like Kid Obvious does, right? And then they'll be down to 2. And then Hawkins trash 1, and you Kid trash 1 next turn. On your 9 turn, and then you have an extra Dawn to put under your leader every turn. Going first in the GP also makes it so they play a slower curve, so they have less swings in the you. You cannot deal with the board. You just have to go face, and a lot of GP's early resources come from their life, and if you're just trashing 3 life consistently every game, that deck will absolutely struggle. We're into the structure deck leaders. Um, I'm not big on red purple. Um, Probably not going to talk too much on these structure deck leaders. This leader could do okay, you know. I think there's some generic good purple. Can't remember what it is, but there is something for this leader that I looked at that was okay. But into the green heavy meta and aggro meta, obviously you do okay into Shanks. Yeah, your best matchup is still Shanks. You know, Blackbeard is still rough. All these green decks is rough, but it could do okay. Um, Not the biggest fan of this leader, you know. Oh, what's the reason to? No reason to play. Just wait to play Snake my next set. Green Uta. Yeah. You guys knew. I brought this to regionals, to the last regionals I played. Started very well, scrubbed. But this deck runs into the problem of losing to Electrical Luna. Um, these yellow decks are really free for you. Because Duffy, last time I had it quite high because I was expecting not a lot of Duffy, but Duffy still just completely beat you. These green decks that just put up your cost kid, you just absolutely cannot do anything. But if he GP is like okay, if they don't see Electric Luna, it's like 50-50. But if they're playing like 4 Electric Luna, then you're done. Shanks, you should beat Shanks every time you play Shanks. Beat Teach every time you play Teach. And then Luchi's back. If a 10 cost Kuzan hits the field, you just lose and you can't really do anything. But yeah, Uta's Uta. You know, it's a known quantity. If you want to play pure film, the deck is more consistent but technically weaker. But is like into decks like Zoro or Doffy is like, oh, sorry, I drew my 8 cost kid into Pluffy, and GP is like, oh, sorry, I drew my Hoodie Jones, and you lose, right? Um, if you see the right pieces at the right time, you can. This deck can definitely top. BY Ace. This deck finds its way onto my tier list every time, and it never does anything. But let's put this here. This did get a new card to that searches for babies, right? And it's a 5 cost ace that searches for babies. Immediate 4 of, um, no matter what. But I really like this deck, and I really hope it does do well because this is like a really fun deck, kind of like another non-linear deck, right? The problem has always been consistency. Um, with the new cards, I actually see this deck doing quite well. So hopefully this deck does well. I'm quite excited to start testing this when EB comes out. ST21 deck's garbage. Yeah. Um, I think that was actually a pretty long video as well. I'll maybe try to edit it down a little bit. Um, Probably not, but yeah. Um, if you have any questions, anything you agree with, anything you don't disagree with, feel free to leave a comment. As always, the best place to try to find me is Discord. You can shoot me a message if you need to find me. Um, you can find me on Twitter if you need anything as well. Might not see it on Twitter, so find me on Discord or comment sections. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you stuck along this drawing, and see you next time. Bye.